A billionaire heiress crashed into his old truck. She didn't know he held her father's last secret. The rain was a solid wall of grey, a relentless assault on the polished black sedan. Elara Vance felt the car shudder, a violent lurch to the right that had nothing to do with the storm. The engine coughed once, a pathetic, sputtering sound, and then died. Silence descended, broken only by the drumming of water on the roof and the rhythmic sweep of the useless wipers. She gripped the leather-wrapped steering wheel. The car, a machine engineered for seamless performance, had failed her. It was a betrayal. For a moment, she did nothing, simply staring through the deluge at the blurred line of trees that marked the edge of the road. This was not part of the itinerary. Her phone had no signal. Of course, the digital map had blinked out miles ago, leaving her to navigate by a series of increasingly faded road signs pointing toward the town of Havenwood, a place she owned on paper but had never seen, a place that contained a factory, a liability, an asset to be liquidated. A pinprick of light appeared in her rearview mirror. It grew steadily, resolving into the twin headlights of an old truck. It pulled up behind her, its engine a low, rumbling counterpoint to the rain. Elara watched, her posture rigid. She was not accustomed to being stranded, to being vulnerable. The truck's door opened, and a man emerged. He wore a heavy canvas jacket that was already dark with rain. He moved with a deliberate economy of motion, his boots sure-footed on the slick asphalt. He approached her window, his face obscured by the brim of a worn baseball cap. She lowered the window a few inches. The air that rushed in was cold and smelled of wet earth and pine. He leaned down slightly, his eyes meeting hers. They were a startlingly clear grey, calm and assessing. He did not ask if she needed help. The situation was self-evident. He simply looked from her face to the front of her expensive, useless car. The right front tire was shredded. He told her the tire was gone. He could patch it, but a patch wouldn't hold on a tire that thin. He had a spare back at his place that might fit. It was a few miles down the road. Elara processed the information, a transaction. He had a solution. She needed it. She asked him how much. A flicker of something, amusement, or maybe just surprise, crossed his face before it settled back into a neutral mask. He said he hadn't thought about it. He just figured she'd want to get out of the storm. This non-answer was inefficient. It complicated the simple exchange of goods and services. She preferred clear terms. She informed him she would pay for his time and for the tire. He nodded slowly, as if considering a complex legal argument. Then he just told her to put her hazards on and wait. He would be back. He turned and walked back to his truck without another word, the rain plastering his jacket to his back. She watched him go, a strange mix of irritation and grudging respect churning within her. His quiet competence was undeniable. He had not been intimidated by the car, or by her. He had simply seen a problem and stated the solution. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The world outside the car was a formless, grey chaos. Elara was a woman who controlled schedules, markets, outcomes. This enforced stillness was a foreign country. She pulled up the file for the Havenwood textile mill on her tablet, the battery icon a stark reminder of her dwindling connection to her world. Project Nightingale. A code name for closure. The numbers were clear. The factory was old, inefficient. It bled money. Her COO, Marcus Thorne, had been advocating for its liquidation for months. His logic was impeccable, his data irrefutable. Close it, sell the land, redirect the capital. She scanned the executive summary. It was a clean, bloodless document. It spoke of market corrections and strategic realignment. It did not speak of the 300 people who worked there. It did not speak of the town that depended on it. Those were externalities. Unquantifiable, the headlights returned. The truck pulled in front of her car this time, its high beams cutting through the gloom. The man got out, moving with the same unhurried purpose. He carried a heavy-looking jack and a tire iron. A young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, hopped out of the passenger side, a bright yellow raincoat a slash of color in the gray. The girl stayed near the truck, watching her father with wide, serious eyes. Elara remained in her car. This was his domain. She was an observer. He worked with a practiced efficiency, the metallic clang of the tire iron and the rhythmic squeak of the jack, a small, industrial symphony against the storm. He did not seem to mind the rain. He did not seem to notice it at all. He had the shredded tire off in minutes. He rolled it to the side and then hefted the spare. It was not a perfect match. The rim was scuffed and plain, a stark contrast to the other 3 polished alloy wheels. But it was functional. As he tightened the last lug nut, he glanced over at the factory name printed on the side of the old tire. Blackwood Tire, a local brand, long since absorbed by a national conglomerate. A brand her own company now owned. He ran a hand over the raised letters of the defunct brand name. "Land doesn't rush," he said, his voice low but carrying over the rain. "It remembers what's buried in it." The words were strange, poetic. They hung in the air between them, feeling less like a comment on the tire and more like a warning. Elara felt an unfamiliar prickle of unease. It was the first mystery. The first hint that the clean, bloodless document on her tablet did not contain the whole story. He finished the work and stood up, wiping his hands on a rag he pulled from his back pocket. The rain had plastered his dark hair to his forehead. For the first time, she saw his face clearly. It was a strong face, etched with lines that spoke of labor and time spent outdoors, but it was not the face of a simple mechanic. There was an intelligence in his eyes, a stillness that was not vacant, but watchful. She opened her door, the conditioned air of the car spilling out into the storm. She stepped out, her expensive leather shoes immediately sinking into the soft, muddy shoulder of the road. She withdrew a money clip from her jacket. She peeled off several large bills, more than enough to cover the service. She held the money out to him. "For your time and the tire." He looked at the money in her hand, then back at her face. He did not take it. He gestured with his head toward the little girl, who was now holding a small, colorful drawing, sheltering it under her coat. "My daughter Maya drew you a picture," he said, "to make you feel better." The girl took a hesitant step forward and held out the drawing. It was a child's rendering of a bright yellow sun and a smiling stick figure, done in crayon. The sheer, uncalculated kindness of the gesture was disarming. It was a currency Elara did not trade in. Elara looked from the drawing to the man's face. She felt a crack appear in the smooth, polished armor she wore. For the first time that day, she was completely at a loss for what to do. The simple transaction had become something complicated, something human. She slowly lowered the hand holding the money. She took the drawing from the child. The paper was slightly damp at the edges. "Thank you, Maya," she said, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. The man, Caleb Blackwood, just nodded. He told her the tire would get her into town. The garage there could order her a new one. He turned to leave. "Wait," she called out. She still did not know his name. He paused. "Caleb," he said. "Caleb Blackwood." The name registered. It wasn't on the executive summary, but it was buried deeper in the files. Blackwood, the family that had originally owned the mill generations ago, before her father's corporation had bought it, before it became just another line item on a balance sheet. The rain began to lessen, the solid wall of grey thinning to a drizzle. The world started to regain its color and shape. Elara stood on the side of the road, holding a child's drawing, her expensive car now marked by a scuffed, mismatched tire. She had come here to close a factory. She had just met a man whose name was woven into its very foundation. The mystery was no longer a cryptic phrase about land. It had a name, Blackwood, and she was beginning to suspect that Project Nightingale was far more complicated than Marcus Thorne had ever let on. She got back into the car, the drawing clutched in her hand. The paper was a fragile, tangible link to a world she did not understand, a world of memory, of history, a world that could not be easily liquidated. She drove the remaining miles into Havenwood slowly. The mismatched tire was a constant wobbling reminder of her collision with Caleb Blackwood. The town appeared as the last of the rain clouds broke apart. It was a small collection of brick buildings and clapboard houses, nestled in a green valley. It looked tired, but not defeated. She checked into the only inn, a clean but dated establishment run by a woman with kind, weary eyes. The room was simple, furnished with solid dark wood furniture that felt like it had been there for a century. From her window she could see the smokestacks of the Havenwood mill rising in the distance. Her factory. Her phone finally found a signal. A flood of notifications poured in. Voicemails from Marcus, urgent emails from the board. The machinery of her life grinding back into motion. She ignored them. She spread the child's drawing out on the polished surface of an old writing desk. The bright, naive sun seemed to mock the grey reality of the factory in the distance. She spent the next day in a rented, unremarkable sedan, a temporary concession to practicality. She drove the perimeter of the factory. It was larger than she had imagined, a sprawling complex of old brick and newer metal siding. Men and women walked through the gates, their faces set with a familiar, weary determination. They were not numbers. They were people going to work. Her inquiries about Caleb Blackwood were met with a quiet, protective wall. The garage owner who ordered her new tire described him as a good man. Keeps to himself. The woman at the inn said he was a devoted father, a hard worker. No one offered more. He was a part of this place, and she was an outsider. She found his property by following a narrow, unpaved road that branched off the main highway. It was a modest farmhouse, well kept, with a large barn that looked more like a workshop. A fence, old but sturdy, enclosed a few acres of pasture. There was a quiet dignity to the place. It felt rooted, permanent. She parked her car at the end of the lane, not wanting to intrude. She saw him in the distance, repairing a section of the fence. He worked with the same steady, focused energy she had seen on the side of the road. Maya was with him, handing him tools. On a whim, Elara opened her laptop. She bypassed the corporate server and used her private access to dig into the unredacted archives. She searched for Blackwood. The files were old, digitized from paper. She found the original acquisition agreement from 30 years ago, signed by her own father. Then she found something else. An employment file. Caleb Blackwood. Not for the mill, but for the parent corporation's central engineering division. He had been a senior materials engineer, a specialist in structural integrity and stress testing. He had resigned abruptly 12 years ago. The reason cited was personal. The date of his resignation was 2 weeks after a major incident at a different company plant. A structural collapse. An incident that had been officially attributed to a subcontractor's error. an incident Marcus Thorne had overseen the internal investigation for. Elara stared at the screen. The man who had fixed her tire, the man she had dismissed as a simple rural mechanic, was a highly skilled engineer who had once worked for her own company. He hadn't just inherited the name Blackwood. He had a past that was directly, professionally intertwined with her corporate world. The quiet recluse was a puzzle, a man with top-tier skills living a simple life by choice. Why? The question settled deep inside her, another piece that didn't fit the neat narrative of Project Nightingale. Later that day, she saw Maya in town. The girl was sitting on a bench outside the general store, sketching in a notepad. Elara hesitated, then walked over. Maya looked up, her expression open and unafraid. She recognized Elara immediately. She held up her notepad. It was a detailed, surprisingly accurate drawing of Elara's black sedan, complete with the mismatched tire. Elara found herself smiling. A real smile. It felt unfamiliar on her face. She sat down on the bench. She asked Maya what she liked to draw. Maya talked about drawing things to remember them. She drew the old bridge before the county tore it down. She drew her mother's favorite flower, a type of lily that only grew by the creek in the spring. She spoke of her mother in the present tense. My mum says that lines are just the start of the story. Elara felt a pang of something she couldn't name. She asked Maya where her mother was. Maya's face clouded for just a second. She's in the stars now, she said simply, as if stating a fact from a science book. Dad says she's the light that helps us find our way home. The simple, profound sadness of the statement struck Elara with unexpected force. This child, this bridge between two worlds, had shown her the heart of the mystery. Caleb Blackwood was not just a recluse. He was a widower, a single father raising a daughter on his own. The pieces were beginning to connect in a way that had nothing to do with profit margins and everything to do with people. Caleb's past as an engineer, his abrupt resignation, his wife's death. His cryptic comment about the land remembering what was buried in it. Elara drove back to the inn, feeling as if the ground had shifted beneath her. She had come to Havenwood to solve a business problem. She was now entangled in a human one. The world she inhabited, a world of power and control, felt thin and brittle compared to the quiet, resilient strength she had glimpsed here. That evening, a call came through from Marcus Thorne. His voice was smooth, confident, tinged with impatience. He wanted to know why she hadn't signed the final closure orders. He had the buyers for the land lined up, a logistics company. They were offering a premium. Elara looked out her window at the distant factory smokestacks. She told Marcus she was conducting a final site review. Due diligence. There was a pause. A cold edge entered his voice. Elara, this is a done deal. The board is aligned. Don't let some misplaced sentimentality derail a billion-dollar realignment. Just sign the papers. She heard what he wasn't saying. He wasn't just advising her, he was warning her, pushing her. And for the first time, she wondered why he was so eager, why this particular factory had to be erased so quickly. She told him she would sign when her review was complete. She ended the call before he could argue. 2 seconds of silence. Long ones. Her phone rang again almost immediately. Not Marcus. It was an encrypted number. Genevieve, her executive assistant, a woman whose loyalty was to Elara, not the company. Genevieve's voice was tense. There's been a data breach, she said. A minor one, they're calling it. But the files accessed were specific. They were all related to the original Havenwood acquisition and the land surveys. And your personal travel docket for this week was flagged. Elara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. This wasn't a random hack, it was targeted. Someone knew she was here, and they were interested in the same history she was starting to uncover. Genevieve continued. Marcus is pushing it to classify it as external mischief, but the digital signature originated from a terminal on the executive floor. He's controlling the narrative, Elara. Be careful. The call ended. The threat was no longer abstract. It was real, and it was close. Marcus wasn't just a corporate rival. He was an antagonist. He was actively working to conceal something, and,